What's up, everybody? Selvin here with another episode of the Black Student Success Podcast, brought to you by Inquire Higher, where we promote and support the success of Black students and professionals through multimedia. So I'm excited to have today's guest on here who has done quite a bit in the last 4 years in the world of data, with having a number of different positions, such as an analyst, a scientist, and more recently, an engineer. He's going to talk about his journey in data, how he got there, what led to him even founding his own company on top of the work that he does, as well as consistently producing content all related to this industry. So, Mark Freeman, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to your audience and talk to you and see how I can provide the most value to y'all in our time here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely excited to have you. So, Mark, we're going to start the way we always do by asking, who is Mark Freeman?
Man, that's a simple but hard question to answer. And I received it beforehand. I've still been thinking, how do I respond to that? First and foremost, I would say I'm a husband. My wife is my world, and she supports me and enables me to achieve what I achieve. And she's been with me since I was in community college all the way to now. She is my rock. So I think I have to first say that. In addition, I'm a brother. I have a little brother who's about to turn 18 soon. So this audience is the same audience as my little brother. So I'm thinking a lot about what information do I provide to him to set him up for success. And then professionally, I'm a data engineer. I'm also a entrepreneur, so I've worked in startups for a majority of my professional career in various data capacities, but also, I've tried building 5 companies beforehand. That sounds impressive. I joke around that most of those companies, except for my current one, has made $0. And so my current company, On the Mark Data, which I'm the founder of, is the first company I made money on, but it took those multiple tries and mess ups to get to this point where now I can actually be like, I'm starting this company. This is the business model. This is how I'm going to drive revenue for that. And I'm happy to go further into that. But I think that best describes who I am in that respect. And just someone who's just I'm a huge data nerd. I love helping people and teaching others. So I'm just excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're excited to have that excitement here, and as you're kind of talking about that and how you got into it yourself, what was the beginning point, when you decided that you wanted to get into data? Is it something that you stumbled on, something that you intentionally walked yourself into to kind of build yourself to where you're at? What was that beginning like for you?
Definitely. So for me, data was not on my purview at all. To believe it or not, I actually didn't think I was capable of even coding. And so how I kind of got into this was, I think a key thing I wanted to highlight is that the moment of realizing something exists and all of a sudden it could change your world. And I think especially thinking about my mom, who plays a big impact in my life. There's a lot of things she didn't know existed. And then when she found out, she's like, how can I provide that to my son? Right. I think a great example, and this will tie in. She didn't know, growing up, she didn't know anyone who owned a house. Everyone around her rented or lived in an apartment or wherever it may be. And then she made a friend who she found out her mom owned a house and multiple houses on the block. And that changed her purview in thinking I can own a house. I will make that possible. Right. And so she's giving that opportunity for me. Fast forward for my life, she worked really hard to enable me to have a different life from her upbringing, for me to have options to pursue my dream. So, breaking generational curses and breaking the cycle of poverty. That's my mom. For me, my job was to take the opportunity and run with that opportunity she gave me. And so every single time being exposed to, oh, that's possible. Oh, that's actually a reality. And so one thing I want to get across before I get into this is just really take the opportunity to expand your horizons and see what's possible. Many times you're limiting yourself. And so where that kind of comes into play was being into tech wasn't even a consideration. I thought I was gonna be a doctor. So that was my main focus, was going to medical school, getting the grades to do that. Fun fact, I could not get the grades. I failed a lot of science classes. And so I actually took a year off from school after graduating from my bachelor's. And my first job, and the only job offer I really got, was at Stanford in student affairs. And I worked at the Haas Center for Public Service. So essentially, in my background, I did a lot of community work, building community programs. So the entrepreneur, but more on the nonprofit side, built scholarships. So like I had the credibility to be like, I can go into this program, I can help students do the same. So that's how I kind of got into that program. And being at Stanford, being at Silicon Valley, not as a student, but just as an employee, opened up my world. Because now I was like, oh my God, there's these tech companies and people can code. And now I'm next to all these leaders that are coming to visit the campus. And there's all these students doing XYZ. And like, I didn't even think it was possible for me to get into Stanford as a student. I actually applied at one point and just didn't respond. It's like, hey, nice, but no thanks kind of thing. But I came across a student at Advice saying like, hey, I'm in this program, community health prevention research. I hear you talking about things you're passionate about. Like, I actually think this would be a really good fit for you. And so the student put this idea in my head that I could be a Stanford student and that would be a good fit for this program. And being at Stanford, I applied. That was actually the only graduate program I applied to. And my other programs I applied to was a postbac, which is essentially if you have really bad grades in your science classes, you go to a postbac, pay a lot of money to improve your grades, get into medical school, right? And so doing a master's in science is another option, making more competitive. So I applied, I got in, and I was just shocked. When I received the letter, I remember I was in front of my boss at Stanford, and I was like, I think they made a mistake. They sent this too early. They didn't accept me. And then it dawned upon me. I remember calling my mom, and I was like, yo, I got accepted into Stanford. And my mom, her thing she says that you just changed the trajectory of our family's lives. And so there's a lot of buildup. Like, where does the data fall in? Is that now it just became clear to me that, like, wow, my dreams were really limited. It is possible. I did achieve this. What can I do now? I'm at Stanford. I'm around entrepreneurship. I'm seeing the social impact work I'm doing is like, it's important, but it's not scaling the way I want. And being at Stanford, being around tech and being around other people who code, it made me realize, oh, wow, I think tech is actually the opportunity for me to scale the impact I want to have in healthcare at the time. And so going into my program, I knew I wanted to do something around tech. I want to do something around healthcare with the focus of how can I scale social impact? Well, I get into my graduate program thinking this is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to make me so competitive for medical school. I hated grad school. Grad school was not for me. I'm not a good student. I'm an intelligent individual who works really hard. I am not a student. It's just not my personality. I have my master's, so like I'm well educated, but I'm not a good student. And so it quickly became real to me. There is no way for me to become a medical student. Like, this is just not a good fit for me. This is not going to be a great fit for me. And so then the question becomes, well, what do I do with my life? All my mentors, everyone I thought for the past like 5, 6, 7 years is saying, Mark, you're gonna be a doctor. You're gonna be a doctor, right? And now that's off the table. And I really started thinking, well, I'm into tech. I'm learning all these stats skills from grad school. I've learned how to code from these stats programs, stuff like that. And I learned I'm capable of coding. So again, expanding horizons. I saw this video from Seth Bling called Mar.io, which is Mario. They trained a deep learning model to beat a Super Mario level automatically with AI. And it just blew my mind. I was like, how can I do this? And I learned about this thing called data science. And I saw what data science could do in healthcare. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a data scientist. I want to work with data. This seems like the best way for me moving forward to be in tech and to scale the ability of like social impact through that. And that was kind of the spark. And so I gave it a lot of background context, but it wasn't a straight shot. It was a culmination of just environment and opportunities and just being open to potential lives ahead of me that really led me to that. So if anything, it was something beyond me that pushed me to data science.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about your story is that there are pieces of it that if you were to just kind of line them up on paper, they wouldn't seem to really add up. You know, you had the bad student, Stanford, you have all these things that kind of like, would misalign, but somehow it still made sense for you. And for the fact of, like you said, being open to expanding things that you don't know, because, if you're so comfortable, like in wherever environment that you're in, either based on the people that you're hanging out with or just, this is all you're able to see, then like you said, it does limit those opportunities for you to be able to see things. And if you didn't, listen to that one student or whoever that was that really encouraged you to apply for Stanford, that wouldn't have opened up the opportunity to learn what data science was, based off of the fact that it was still within that interest of healthcare, because that was kind of your trajectory at the time. But you found a way to connect it to something else and how that connects to a whole bunch of other things. You mentioned, the Mario game, and just kind of the other things that kind of roll into data science as you started to learn more about that. So that's the piece of the story that I really love to hear, is that because it wasn't so straightforward, you got to learn about so many things before you kind of came back and narrowed down into something that you really learned about and really was passionate about.
I think one thing I want to add as well to this is, key to this is the habit of just showing up. I show up not knowing what the outcome is going to be, if it's going to be the best thing, but more often than not, just showing up. Most people don't show up. Most people get stuck in analysis paralysis or like count themselves out before even showing up. If you show up, you're ahead of most people, and you'll gain so much from just showing up that the next time you show up, it just compounds over and over again. All the opportunities I have just stemmed from me just showing up and people noticing me, and it's increasing my surface area of luck because I'm just present. And from that, just kind of like letting the opportunities guide me to which direction I should go and what my interests are, rather than trying to think what's the perfect path first. It's just showing up and see what happens.
Absolutely. I appreciate you adding that in there. So now, as you're kind of getting along, you've kind of found this area that you want to get into, and you're learning more about it. You're learning how to apply it to healthcare. You eventually get through your master's program, and you're starting to build more experiences, expanding that. Did you face any setbacks, being in this field, but specifically being Black in this field? Or were there any setbacks just, specifically being Black before you even got into data that you had to kind of work through to kind of get to where you're at now?
Yeah. So, I would love to say that Stanford was the best time of my life. It was actually the worst time of my life, to be honest, and not from the school, but because of the amount of pressure it had, it just unsurfaced so much mental health stuff that I just didn't spend the time to address up until that point. And so when you get put into a pressure program, grad school is one of the hardest things. So it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I encourage it if it makes sense for you, but just be prepared to know it's about to be really hard. But that environment just like broke me. I almost dropped out of Stanford, and because it's got so overwhelming for my mental health. And the reason why I tie this back to like kind of setbacks and challenges, like when I got out of my grad program, I actually didn't even go into a data role. I went to an operations role because I just felt so broken and didn't have the confidence to actually pursue my dream. I was like, you know what, let me just do this just to keep on going, to just keep on living for a little bit longer, right? But the reason I bring up this mental health is that and this ties to being Black, is that one, many times Black folks, like in the Black community, is like it's almost shunned, especially for Black men, to pursue mental health services. And there's a whole bunch of other different kind of social norms around that we can definitely dive into if you want to. But I spent way too long not getting help initially when I should have. So for context, when I was in high school, I went to a pretty nice private high school that my mom and dad sacrificed for me to go. And I wanted to leave all the time because I just experienced so much racism there at that school. And I remember every year telling my mom, like, I don't want to go here. I don't want to go here. And my mom was like, no, you need to go here because this affluent group of people that you're around, it's going to be people controlling kind of the world around you. You need to learn how to navigate this environment, even if you're uncomfortable. And it sucked, but I'm very thankful because it allows me to be a social chameleon, really, in a lot of these spaces that don't look like me, right? But that did have a really big negative impact on me, is that, I was in AP classes and people tell me, Mark, how are you in AP classes? You're Black. Or I'll be called straight up the N-word. Or even I was the only person of color, not person of color, but Black person on the rugby team, and a plays that went to me was called Jim Crow. So that level of racism being thrown at you all the time, it really shattered my understanding of what being Black and successful is. And so I thought, to like get my Black card, right, I had to like live up to these stereotypes that other people placed on me. And that put me into a position where I was around the wrong crowd, thinking that this was my way to get my Black card. And I got myself into situations that caused a lot of trauma. And that trauma really gave me some PTSD that I just did not deal with. And so all through undergrad, I dealt with it unbeknownst to me, all the way up to my first job at Stanford, still had it until I had a breaking point. And they had to sit down, but I finally got in front of a therapist and they're like, Mark, you have PTSD. You need to work through this. And that started my journey of going through mental health. Also identifying other things. I got diagnosed with having obsessive compulsive disorder for that. And that's what really brought me to my knees in college, not college, in grad school. And so these are the setbacks. It's actually like not necessarily self-inflicted, but like I didn't get the help that I needed. And I didn't know how to get help. And so, being Black in America, you deal with a lot of traumatic stuff. It's hard to exist in these spaces, especially when you go into affluent spaces. Many times you're like the only one there representing for yourself. And there's a lot of pressure. And especially, my parents, especially my mom, my parents didn't go to college. My mom grew up in the hood, like broke cycle of poverty. There's a lot of pressure for you to succeed and do the best you can. And sometimes the way you approach that is just not the best and most healthy way. And so the major setback actually wasn't like school or anything like that. It was, myself. How do I take care of myself on a deeper level? How do I build the support systems around to make me succeed? And I'll be honest, my career and my life didn't flourish until I got that under control. And I'm happy to go more into detail, like what that transformation looked like. But I think that's the biggest setback is like mental health and that intersection, mental health and being Black in America.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not an uncommon thing to be one of the few or the only person in not only the professional workspace, but even in school as well, whether that dates back to high school or you get the great opportunity to go to a really good school that just happens to have a majority of white or just a very small Black population there. Given those times that you were in those spaces and maybe even looking back in retrospect, or maybe once you found an opportunity to address your mental health and, still found yourself in some of those, those spaces where you're one of the few, how did you end up dealing with that? Because I think if you can at least provide some kind of advice as far as how to navigate those different areas, even before addressing the mental health, which again, is a whole separate topic.
That's a whole other beast.
a whole separate thing.
Yeah.
If you can provide our listeners just kind of with a way to navigate, and not only just navigate those different spaces to kind of make sure that they're keeping themselves up, but still finding a way to make sure that they're still themselves, once they kind of navigate through. So any pieces of advice that you would give to our audience with that?
So I think this podcast and this platform is exactly why this is so important. Why I'm so happy to be here is because a transformational thing was actually an undergrad for me. So when I went from community college to university at UC Davis, that was my first experience seeing Black excellence and seeing it celebrated. But more importantly, the diversity of Black identities that didn't fit into a box of stereotypes that was given to me in high school, where you can be yourself, be Black, and succeed and be celebrated for your individuality of that. And you just so happen to have this identity of Blackness, right?